The town was quiet that evening, the kind of quiet that made every sound seem louder. Birds had gone to roost, the streetlights flickered softly, and the neighborhood felt peaceful. But inside one small house, life was far from peaceful. A boy, only 16, sat on his bed staring at his phone. He had just received a message from the girl he had been secretly dating. They had kept their relationship hidden from their families, fearing judgment. But this message was different. It changed everything. The words on the screen were simple, yet they hit him like a storm. She was pregnant. At 16, he felt a knot tighten in his chest, panic rising faster than he could control. His mind raced in 1,000 directions all at once. What would his parents say? How would her family react? How could they even begin to handle this? For a moment, he just sat there, frozen. He wanted to cry, but he couldn't. He wanted to run, but he felt trapped. He had never imagined life could throw him into a situation like this so suddenly. Meanwhile, the girl was sitting across town, holding her stomach, feeling a mixture of fear and uncertainty. She had wanted to tell him in person, but she didn't know how. Her hands shook as she waited for his reply. She was terrified, not only for herself, but for the boy she cared about. When he finally typed back, his words were short, almost cold. "We need to talk." The next day, they met at a small park, hidden behind trees and benches where no one could watch them. The boy looked pale, his hands constantly fidgeting, his eyes avoiding hers. The girl's voice trembled as she spoke, trying to explain her feelings and fears. "I don't know what to do," he whispered. "I didn't expect this, not now." "I'm scared too," she said softly. "I thought I could handle it, but now, I don't know." For hours, they sat there, talking in whispers, trying to make sense of a situation neither of them could have ever imagined. They dreamed of running away, of fixing everything somehow, but deep down they both knew life wasn't that simple. At home, the boy's parents noticed his quiet behavior. He had always been a lively teenager, joking and laughing with his friends. But now he seemed withdrawn, distracted, almost scared. They didn't know what had changed, but they sensed that something serious was going on. At the same time, the girl's parents were busy with their own concerns, unaware of the secret growing tension between the two teens. Life continued as usual outside, but inside, both houses were filled with anxiety and uncertainty. Days passed, and the boy tried to focus on school, on friends, on anything that could distract him. But the news followed him everywhere, a shadow. He couldn't escape. Whispers began circulating in the school, small rumors he could hear but never confirm. He tried to ignore them, but each whisper felt like a weight pressing down harder and harder. The girl also faced rumors, subtle glances from classmates, the occasional snicker when she passed. She felt exposed, vulnerable, and alone. Both of them were teenagers, facing adult problems they had no idea how to solve. And yet, despite the fear, despite the panic, something else was there too. A bond between them, fragile but real. They knew they had to support each other, even if the world around them seemed ready to collapse. But the sense of calm, fragile as it was, wouldn't last. Outside forces, whispers, and judgments were already closing in. Something was coming, something they could not yet see. As the sun set that evening, painting the sky in shades of red and orange, both teens felt a sense of dread. They didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but deep down, they felt it would change everything. And they were right, because life, they would soon realize, had plans far darker than they could ever imagine. After that fateful evening in the park, life for the boy and the girl seemed almost normal on the surface, but beneath it, everything was changing. Every day brought a new challenge, a new worry, a new fear they hadn't been prepared for. At school, the boy tried to act like nothing had happened. He laughed at jokes, answered questions in class, and even helped his friends with homework. But it was hard to hide the tension in his eyes, the way his hands trembled when someone got too close. Some of his classmates noticed, and whispers began to spread. At first they were small and harmless, but then they grew louder. "She's pregnant," someone muttered in the hallway. "Didn't you hear?" The words hit him like a punch. He wanted to deny it, to scream, to tell them all to leave him alone. But the rumors were already spreading faster than he could stop them. Each passing day made him feel more isolated. Like the walls of the school were closing in, the girl faced the same pressure. People stared at her in the cafeteria, snickered when she walked by, and sometimes even whispered cruel things under their breath. She tried to ignore it, but the fear and shame weighed heavily on her young shoulders. Every glance felt like judgment. Every whisper felt like a threat. At home, neither of them felt safe. The boy's parents noticed the change in him. They tried to ask what was wrong, but he avoided their questions, giving vague answers or shrugging them off. He was afraid of disappointing them, of revealing the secret that now controlled his life. The girl also struggled with her parents. She wanted to tell them everything, but she feared their reaction. The secret felt like a heavy stone she had to carry alone. Nights were the worst when the house was quiet, and all the fears that had been hidden during the day came rushing back. As the rumors continued, the pressure outside began to match the fear inside. Some students didn't just whisper, they threatened him. It started small, a shove in the hallway, a note left in his locker, a warning to fix this problem before it's too late. At first he tried to laugh it off, thinking it was just a joke, but soon he realized that the threats were real. The girl noticed the change too. She saw the fear in his eyes, the way he flinched at sudden noises, the way he avoided certain people. She tried to comfort him, but there was only so much she could do. At 16, they didn't have the tools to face the dark intentions of others. They were just kids, caught in a storm far bigger than them. One evening, the boy sat alone in his room, staring at the ceiling. The shadows of the past week seemed to grow longer, darker, reaching for him even in the safety of his home. The fear that had started as whispers in the school corridors was now a constant presence, pressing down on him. He knew something bad could happen, but he didn't know what or when. Meanwhile, the girl tried to stay hopeful. She dreamed of a future where they could face the challenges together, where life wouldn't be so cruel. But deep down, she too felt the tension, the unshakable sense that things were moving toward a breaking point. And they were right, because in a town filled with gossip, judgment, and anger, sometimes the words themselves are only the beginning. Threats grow louder, fear grows deeper. And for those who feel cornered and powerless, desperation can turn into tragedy. As the sun set on another day, the boy and girl sat silently in their rooms, thinking about what the future might hold. Neither spoke the words aloud, but both knew the truth. Life as they knew it was changing, and soon, nothing would ever be the same again. Something dark was coming, and there was no way to stop it. The evening was unusually quiet, almost too quiet. The boy walked home from school, his backpack heavy with books, but his heart felt heavier. Every step seemed louder than it should, as if the world itself was warning him. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. At the same time, the girl sat by her window, staring out at the street. She had called him earlier, but he didn't answer. A pit of worry had settled in her stomach. Something told her that tonight would change everything. As he reached the corner near his house, he noticed a small group of students waiting there. At first, he thought they just wanted to talk, maybe to apologize for the rumors, but as he got closer, he could see the expressions on their faces. There was anger, resentment, and something darker he couldn't name. His heart began to race. He wanted to run, but the street was narrow, and they were blocking his path. Panic filled him, clouding his thoughts. He tried to speak, to explain, to tell them it was a misunderstanding, but the words wouldn't come out. The confrontation escalated quickly. Voices were raised, shoves were exchanged. Fear gripped him like never before. He realized he was in real danger, more danger than he had ever imagined. And in that moment the world felt cold, unkind, and unforgiving. Meanwhile, the girl had sensed something was wrong. She ran outside, calling his name, but by the time she reached the street, everything had already happened. She saw him lying there, motionless, and her heart froze. She didn't understand what had happened at first. Her mind refused to accept the truth. Neighbors began to appear, drawn by the shouting and commotion. Some tried to help, some just stood frozen in shock. The boy's friends ran to get adults to get help, but it was too late. The damage was done, and a silence heavier than the night itself settled over the street. The girl fell to her knees beside him, tears streaming down her face. She held his hand, trembling, unable to believe that someone so full of life could be gone in an instant. Fear, grief, and confusion collided in her chest. She wanted to scream, to make the world stop, but all that came out was a broken whisper of his name. Parents, friends, and neighbors gathered, their faces pale, eyes wide with disbelief. The boy's parents rushed out, calling his name, and then breaking down as they saw him lying there. It was a scene no parent ever wants to witness. Their child, gone far too soon, taken by something they could not control or prevent. Authorities were called, and soon the street was filled with flashing lights, officers, and concerned adults. Questions were asked, statements were taken, but the grief overshadowed every word. The girl, still holding his hand, could barely speak, only able to shake her head in sorrow and disbelief. The town was shocked. How could something so cruel happen in a place where life had seemed safe and ordinary? The tragedy rippled through the community, leaving a mark that would never fade. Friends whispered in corners, neighbors shook their heads in disbelief, and the boy's family struggled to comprehend the sudden loss. Even in the darkness, there was a strange, painful clarity. Life was fragile, precious, and sometimes it ended far too soon. And for those left behind, the grief was raw, immediate, and impossible to ignore. As the night grew deeper, the girl finally let go of his hand, her tears falling freely. She knew life would never be the same. She knew that the world had taken something irreplaceable from her. And she knew that the boy's story, though ended too soon, would be remembered not for the tragedy itself, but for the love, fear, and hope that had existed before it. The town, quiet once again, felt empty in a way it never had before. Streets that were once familiar now seemed cold and unwelcoming, and the girl, still trembling, made a silent promise she would honor his memory. Somehow, some way, even as the world around her tried to move on. The morning after the tragedy, the town felt different, heavier, quieter, like the air itself was grieving. The streets that had once been filled with laughter and chatter were now empty, the usual sounds of life replaced with whispers of sorrow and disbelief. At the boy's home, his parents sat in silence, staring at the walls of his room. The bed was still neatly made, his backpack untouched on the floor, reminders of a life that had been cut short far too soon. They couldn't understand how everything had happened so quickly, how their son, once so full of life and laughter, could be gone in the blink of an eye. The girl was at home as well, her parents trying to comfort her, but she felt numb. She kept replaying the events of the night before in her mind. His eyes, the fear, the panic, and then the sudden, terrifying stillness. She couldn't stop asking herself, could she have done something to prevent it? Was there a sign she missed? The questions circled endlessly, leaving her exhausted and broken. At school, the news spread like wildfire. Teachers tried to comfort the students, but many were too shocked to listen. Friends of the boy cried in corners, holding each other tightly. Some classmates felt guilty, thinking perhaps their whispers or rumors had contributed to what had happened. Others were simply overwhelmed by the realization that life could be so cruel and unfair. Authorities arrived to investigate, questioning neighbors, friends, and anyone who might have seen something. Detectives spoke quietly but firmly, piecing together what had occurred the night before. While the details were unclear to most, everyone understood one thing: a life had been lost, and the impact would be felt for years to come. The girl was asked to speak to the authorities. Her voice trembled as she recounted the events, her tears falling freely. She explained the fear, the threats, and the pressure both she and the boy had faced in recent weeks. Every word was a struggle, but she wanted to tell the truth, to make sure people understood that this tragedy was more than just a moment. It was a buildup of fear, judgment, and misunderstanding. In the days that followed, the town held vigils and gatherings. Candles were lit, flowers placed, and memories shared. People spoke of the boy's kindness, his humor, his dreams. They remembered him as more than just the tragic headline. He was a friend, a neighbor, a child taken too soon. The girl attended one of the gatherings, standing quietly at the edge. She listened to stories about him, smiling weakly through her tears. She realized that while the pain would never fully go away, she was not alone in her grief. Others had loved him too, and together, they could honor his memory. Through it all, the authorities continued their work. They spoke to anyone involved, trying to understand the motives, the warnings, and the events that led up to the tragedy. Their goal was not only to find answers, but also to ensure that something like this could be prevented in the future. The boy's parents, despite their heartbreak, tried to reach out to the girl. They didn't know what words could comfort her, but they wanted to show her that she was not alone. They understood that the tragedy had affected more than just their family. It had impacted everyone who knew him. As the investigation unfolded, the girl reflected on everything that had happened. She thought about the pressure, the fear, and the judgment they had both faced. She thought about how quickly life could change and how fragile it truly was. And she realized that while she could not change what had happened, she could honor his memory by speaking out, by helping others understand the consequences of rumors, fear, and isolation. The town, slowly returning to routine, carried a new awareness. Parents spoke more openly with their children. Students were reminded to treat each other with kindness, and the memory of one boy served as a painful but important lesson. Life is precious, and the effects of fear, pressure, and judgment can be devastating. Even in the shadow of tragedy, the girl began to find small moments of hope. She promised herself she would live in a way that honored him, carrying forward the lessons learned, the love they had shared, and the memories that would never fade. Weeks passed since that tragic night, but for the girl and the boy's family, it felt like yesterday. The town had slowly returned to its usual rhythm, but the shadow of loss lingered everywhere. Empty spaces, quiet streets, and whispers of memories reminded everyone that life could change in an instant. The girl still struggled with her grief. Every day was a battle between sadness and the desire to honor him. She often visited the park where they had spent so many afternoons together, tracing the paths they had walked, replaying conversations in her mind, remembering the laughter and moments of comfort. The pain never left entirely, but slowly she learned to carry it with a sense of purpose. The boy's parents were also learning to cope. They held on to memories, his laugh, his dreams, the small acts of kindness he had shown. They spoke at school gatherings, sharing his story, not to dwell on the tragedy, but to encourage understanding and compassion among other families and students. They wanted his life to teach something important, that judgment, gossip, and fear could have far-reaching consequences. School became a place of reflection for the students as well. Teachers spoke more openly about emotions, mental health, and the importance of communication. Students were encouraged to check in on friends, to offer support instead of judgment. The story of the boy's life and untimely death became a cautionary tale, a reminder that small actions and words could deeply affect others. The girl found her own way to honor him. She volunteered with local youth programs, talking to teens about the importance of honesty, courage, and facing challenges together. She spoke about fear, isolation, and the dangers of rumors, but she also spoke about hope, love, and resilience. Sharing her experiences helped her heal, and it gave meaning to the tragedy that had once felt overwhelming and unfair. She also began to reflect on the lessons she had learned personally. She realized that secrecy and fear had contributed to the pain. If she and the boy had felt supported, had had someone to talk to without judgment, perhaps the tension that built around them could have been eased. This awareness became her motivation, to ensure that other teens wouldn't face such fear alone. The town, once shocked and silent, slowly started to embrace a sense of community. Families spoke more openly with each other. Friends supported one another more intentionally. And while the tragedy would never be forgotten, it created a ripple effect of awareness, care, and empathy. Even in the quiet moments when grief still returned uninvited, the girl carried hope in her heart. She knew that honoring his memory wasn't about forgetting the tragedy, but about learning from it, sharing it, and making the world a slightly kinder place. One evening, she returned to the park, sitting on the bench where they had shared so many conversations. She whispered his name, feeling the warmth of his memory in the cool evening air. "I'll carry you with me," she said softly. Not as sadness, but as strength, not as fear, but as hope. And with that, she stood ready to face the future. Life would not be the same, and it would never be easy, but it could still hold meaning, love, and compassion. She had lost someone precious, but she had gained a purpose: to honor life, protect the vulnerable, and remind others that words, actions, and kindness could save lives before it was too late. The town would remember him not just for the tragedy, but for the lessons he left behind. And the girl would continue forward, carrying both grief and hope, forever changed, but determined to make a difference.